to another Conversations With. This is our Legend series. So we started off our Legend series in the beginning of the year with soon-to-be Hall of Fame coach Dick Vermeil, who's going to get inducted into the Hall of Fame and obviously won a Super Bowl with the Rams. And what a way to end the year, but with a legend, Avram Miller, who I'll introduce in a second. So anyway, happy holidays to everybody. This is our last Conversations With for the year, but thank you guys for spending your time with us. I really appreciate it. Before we get started with Avram, I wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping. So the next three Conversations With, I want to make sure everybody has those in their calendar. We've got January 11th. We have Megan Riley. She's going to take us from her journey from Shark Tank to leading a global franchise. Then on January 25th, we've got Kat Gazarian, the CEO of Game Day HR. And on February 8th, we've got Antonia Hawk, the global head of the Ritz-Carlton Leadership Center. So we've got a great group of folks, and we've got plenty past that, but those are our next three. And then we're launching an official book club in January. And I will give you the entire lineup later, but I'm going to give you the first three. So in January, we've got my good friend Karen Dillon. Karen was the editor of the Harvard Business Review, and she wrote three New York Times bestsellers with a legend from the Harvard Business School, Clayton Christensen. And we're going to be talking about the first book that they wrote together, which is How Will You Measure Your Life? We're going to follow that up in February with a conversation with Dana Cavalier. Dana was the longtime performance coach for the New York Yankees, and his brand new book, Habits of a Champion Team, is just coming out. So we're going to talk to Coach Cavalier in February. And then in March, we have maybe one of the most famous Navy SEALs out there, Jason Redman, and we're going to talk about his book, Overcome. So we're excited about the book club. That's Q1. When you hear the rest of the lineup, you're going to be equally impressed. It's a star-studded lineup. So today, thanks to an introduction from Kara Golden, we're able to spend some time with somebody who I think is an absolute legend. I think we're about a month and a week away from his 77th birthday. And we are super excited to have Avram Miller joining us from Tel Aviv. So it's 7 p.m. and we are 1 hour away from him getting a gin and tonic. So
yeah, well, thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. Thank you for joining us today. So for those of you who don't know, I'll give a quick introduction and then I want to jump right into it. So Avram has been called everything from a one-man think tank from USA Today to the famous quote from Andy Grove, who called him Wild Duck. And today we're celebrating his incredible memoir, The Flight of a Wild Duck, which I was blown away when I read it. He is the former co-founder of Intel Capital, and trying to condense Avram's life into a couple paragraphs is very difficult, but we're going to unpack it a little bit in the next hour. So Avram, first of all, thank you for joining us. And I wanted to start, I thought one of the things that struck me in the book was your vulnerability and the way you talked about your childhood. And I think, today you're known as this iconic, legendary figure from Silicon Valley. And I think, whether it's broadband or the PC or internet or whatever, those are the things that you're known for. But I found your childhood, the way you grew up, fascinating. Your life as a musician, the things that you did in medical research long before you got into the tech scene. Take us back to kind of early Avram, and tell us a little bit about how you grew up and kind of that life journey.
Well, first of all, as you said, I'm almost 77. So many of the people that are probably listening to this were born much later than that. I was born during World War II. Adolf Hitler was still alive. And Frank was still alive. The first computer had yet to run. And I was born into a Jewish family of merchants, a sort of a dysfunctional family, to tell you the truth. But there I was. And unfortunately,
I haven't had a chance to get out of the market in Boston.
What
Cassie,
happened?
Can we mute everybody?
Oh, what happened? Something happened here. I'm no longer, I can't even see myself anymore. What happened? I have Abby Rabello on the screen.
We can see you.
Okay, fine. Or see you. Anyway, I was very sick as a child. I had chronic asthma. I mean, really sick, like desperate to breathe. I would be going to the hospital all the time. They would give me adrenaline and I wasn't sure I would even live. But I started learning critical lessons of my life. I learned that if I could keep the nurses laughing, they would take better care of me. That was probably the most important lesson, one of the most important lessons of my life. And by the age of 7, some of the doctors decided I should go away to a special home. It was called the Palo Alto Convalescent Home. Later, it became part of the Stanford University Child Center, but the building is now the Ronald McDonald Home. So it's pretty kind of funny. And I was put there. I think they just wanted to get me away from my parents, and so, but there was nothing going on. You know, this was before anything. I mean, we had a TV someplace. I used to watch Hapalong, Cassidy, and Howdy Doody and so on. But mostly I was alone in my room. Something else is happening now. Anyway, I was alone in my room, and it was an amazing time because I decided to explore what was inside my head. I learned to change the colors of the walls and change the room. And I just worked on my imagination. And I think this turned out to be a very important thing later in my life. But having finished there, graduating from the convalescent home and going back to my family and going to school, I found out I couldn't function in school. I just couldn't make it. I couldn't understand what was going on. And unfortunately for me, there were a couple of teachers there that said, listen, if you can study by yourself in the library and we'll give you books to read. And I probably read a book every day. And that began my education and began my understanding that it was up to me to educate myself. So I continued with that. I basically failed everything but choir. When I was 15, I joined the choir because I thought maybe this class I could pass, which I did pass. And there I learned about music. I had a friend who, like me, was interested in philosophy and history and science and everything you can imagine, but he was also interested in music. He was a composer. And so I was very techie or geeky. I loved science. I had been studying science since probably I was 8 years old. And electronics, I built my own radio, and I did things Microsoft, I had my microscopes, and I blew up the house with my chemistry set. But my friend Rich was a composer, and I said to him, I can remember the day, I said, how does music work? Because for me, it was like a science project. And he explained to me music theory, and he gave me a book by Hindemith, and I learned how to compose. And I actually got a scholarship to San Francisco Conservatory of Music to study composition and arrangement, which I did for a while. And then I was 18. I still hadn't graduated high school. I was going to graduate high school. My mom found a private school that she could bribe, and she paid them some money, and they let me test out, and I got a high school degree. I never thought about going to university. It never even occurred to me. We never talked about it. Everybody in my family had shopkeepers. I thought probably someday I'll have a shop. But I managed to get, through a connection, I managed to get a job as a seaman, a merchant seaman, as a steward on a luxury liner called the President Cleveland. And I sailed back and forth to Asia, to Japan, to Hong Kong, and the Philippines. It wasn't like now. These were developing countries. People were sleeping on mattresses. And I don't know how I survived, because the people on the ship that I worked with were pretty rough. But somehow I did survive. And after a while, I left that. I became very involved in the civil rights movement, and later the anti-war movement. And in the music scene in San Francisco. So I was privileged to know people like Janis Joplin, Jefferson Airplane, all those people. But I like Janis's music, but by and large, I didn't like rock and roll. By that time, I was a jazz pianist. And so I didn't like drugs. I didn't mind. They would say, let's get stoned and practice. And I would say, let's get practice and then get stoned. Because I was more serious about it, I guess. And I also knew there were more than three chords. I used to have to help them arrange things. So after that, at some point, I need to move this more quickly. After that, I ran out of money. I said to my friends, does anybody know a job I can get? And somebody said, do you know anything about electronics? And I said, yeah, I know something. Well, there's this professor, he's doing research into brain waves, and he needs some equipment. His name was Joe Camilla. Do you think you could help him? I said, yeah, introduce me to him. So at that time, I was like the night manager at a pizza store. But I met Joe, and Joe told me what he wanted to do. He wanted to do biofeedback, because we don't know what's going on with our brainwaves. And his idea was, if you could tell people what was happening in their brainwaves, maybe they could control it. And if they control it, maybe they would have different experiences. And he wanted to study Zen monks, and he needed some equipment. And he said, well, can you do this? And I said, yeah, maybe I'll try. I didn't have a lot to lose. I'd just go back to the pizza store. So I said, if I do this, will you give me a job? He said, yes. So I did it. He gave me a job. We worked together for almost 3 years. We're pretty successful what we did. And it was the 60s. You have to imagine it's the 60s. And we're studying Zen monks and all this stuff. And we're getting a lot of notoriety. We're in the Walter Cronkite show. People like Timothy Leary are dropping by. It's kind of crazy. And but in that period of time, I was designing all kinds of electronics. I could do anything, amplifiers and microvolt amplifiers, crazy things. But I was doing also digital logic. I fell in love with digital logic. One day we bought a computer to replicate an experiment somebody else was doing. I didn't know what a computer was. So after everybody left that day, I stayed up all night trying to figure out the computer. And I recognized parts of it, all the hardware I could figure out, but I didn't understand how it was programmed, because in those days I was programming logic circuits using a patch board, like you would see the telephone operators in a movie, the movies, telephone operators connecting people. That's what I was doing. And so I read the manuals and I looked at schematics, and at 3 a.m. in the morning, I had an epiphany. I understood what software was, and it blew me out of the universe. That was one of the most amazing experiences. I could still feel it in my gut, to understand the power of software, to be able to create something out of nothing. And by that morning, I was a programmer. And so, it was a different time, because I was able to do everything. I couldn't do that now, but it wasn't that complex at the time. And so I could build the hardware and I could write the programs, I could do it. And so I was in love with computers, and it's a love affair that still goes on to this day. In 1969, because Ronald Reagan became governor of the state of California, I didn't like him so much. And I got a great job offer to go to Holland to be kind of one of the founders of a medical institution called the Thorax Center. And it was focused on cardiovascular and pulmonary medicine. And I went there, and we developed the first catheterization lab system, first echo system. We developed a lot of pioneering things in computers and medicine. My expertise was really real-time physiological processing. And, I did very well there. I got married, I had 2 kids. And then I thought, shit, I can't let my kids grow up in Holland. Holland was a graveyard for Jews. There was only 8,000 Jews left after the Holocaust. And so we decided to go to Israel, and I lived in Israel for 5 years, and I started a business there, and I was an associate professor. Now, remember, I'm now 29 years old, and I'm an associate professor of medicine, and I've never been to school or to college or university. And I just point that out because I think, I point it out because I want people like me to realize that it can happen. After that, I'm going to try to, maybe I should stop there. I'll stop there, and then you can ask me questions.
So it's, your life is so fascinating. And then obviously, you found Intel Capital. But one of the things that I also loved in the book was there's a conversation. It's not terribly long, but it talks about why is an important question versus how. And that you were somebody who was always asking why. So yeah. Why is that such an important question for people to ask?
Well, all these things are important. How is about execution. Why is about the object, the thing that you're trying. Why are we trying to do this? If I can't answer that question, why do I care that I can do it? What is the significance of it? And so, I had a lot of, curiosity. So if there's, I think that curiosity, intuition, imagination, creativity, these are critical things that are missing from our institutions because our educational system drives them out.
Yep.
Okay. I was lucky. Nobody took it away from me. Okay. It isn't that I was so unique that I had it. No, we all have it, in my opinion. It just gets filtered out as we evolve. And the reason that a company like Intel, jumping way ahead with Andy Grove and Les Fidesz and all the rest, wanted somebody like me is they kind of realized this. And so it's important to have people that, well, they say nonlinear thinking, people think outside the box. I like to say it's thinking outside the coffin because I think that's what the box is. But, we need a mixture of people. I'm okay in execution, but that's not my strength, but there are people that can do that. We need this mixture. Unfortunately, we don't tolerate in our institutions, we don't tolerate people that are asking why. Because, the answer why is because I told you to.
Yeah.
I'm the boss. Don't ask me why. Okay. And, so there's some things in our culture that aren't good. The fact is, when we look at all the crazy things that we accomplish, I don't think we have a way to measure it.
Right.
We don't really have a way to say, oh, we're doing so great. We're only saying, we're doing better than we were doing. We're comparing ourselves to ourselves, but not to what we could be.
So Andy Grove, though, recognized in that famous quote where he said every company needs a wild duck, and that's for us, it's Avram
he recognized it, but it wasn't really, he didn't really listen that well. It was his idea that he thought he needed a wild duck.
Yeah. So it's a great quote, but he didn't actually live it. Yes
and no. He never stopped me. He could have stopped me. He supported me in all the things I wanted to do. He let me go in the consumer market when he didn't think there was a consumer market.
Yep.
He let Les and I create Intel Capital, which is a weird thing for a semiconductor to do. We were the largest corporate venture group, maybe still is in the world, but we were when I was there. he made me a vice president. There were only 28 officers of the company. He made me a vice president in a company of 80,000 when I was, a wild duck. So in that sense, Andy did it, but he had a hard time, like everybody. The hardest problem is it's not what you do when things go bad in a corporation. It's what you do when things are going well. Because when things are going well is when it's very hard to do the things that you need to do to continue that. And you put all the best people on the thing that's going well. And Intel was so successful in those days. And, and real men had P&Ls and, and so on, I always say. And so it's very, very hard, and I keep thinking about this, how do you do this? How can, as a CEO, how do you do it? So it wasn't, I wouldn't say that Andy ignored it totally, but he was so focused on the PC, which was such an amazing opportunity, but he didn't really think beyond it.
Right. So, one of the things that's so fascinating about having these discussions with folks like yourself is you have an inside perspective on things that we only either watch, a movie about it or we read about it in books, and, you're an insider, so the truth. And so I'm just curious, from an inside perspective, is there any popular myth surrounding, it could be Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Microsoft, Apple, Intel, whatever, that you as an insider go, yeah, not quite what everybody thinks?
It's a little hard because I'm going to have to diss some people, but anyway.
Right. Hey.
Yeah. But okay. Bill Gates, not the sharpest tool in the shed. Okay. But has built up and projected this view that he was so smart. Not that he's a dumb person, but he wasn't extraordinary, not at all. Bill Gates was the most competitive, predatory person I've ever met in my life. So if something moved, he would jump on it, right? And he had a strategy that turns out to be, I think, was correct. I think Intel would have been better off had it followed Bill's strategy. So in some sense, he had a strategy, I guess. I just think it was instinctual. But his strategy was, I want to own it all. Yeah. I want every piece of software possible. So I see somebody's building a company doing XYZ. I don't know what XYZ is, but I want it.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to either buy it or I'm going to do it or I'm going to get it. And if I do enough of this, then whatever is going to work, I'm going to own. And whatever doesn't work, I'm going to shed. But, Andy used to say about Microsoft is Microsoft was an inch deep and a mile wide because of this. And I used to say, okay, but we're an inch wide and a mile deep.
Right.
And I think you're better off being an inch wide, an inch deep and a mile wide because of the changes, and so on. Other people, I don't know. It's hard. Jeff Bezos, for instance, I consider the best CEO of modern times. But
why do you say that?
Well, first of all, we have to look at results.
Yep.
Okay. But because also he understood, he was willing not to listen to Wall Street. Once you listen to Wall Street, it's all over, game over. Okay. So he was willing to not listen to Wall Street. He said, I'm going to reinvest. I'm not going to have a profit. Why would I have a profit? I have to pay taxes on that. Half of the money or a third of the money is going to go to the government. Why don't I just reinvest? Now you just can't reinvest unless you have good ideas. So he understood, and he used his business to find those ideas. And so, there's a lot of things about him. Now, he's a guy that in the old days, I would go out of my way to not be near him because I found him creepy.
Really?
Yeah. He was a really strange guy.
Yeah.
So I don't really know him very well. but I can admire him, just like I admire Steve Jobs. I've written a huge amount about Steve Jobs because I was fascinated by him, but I didn't like him because he wasn't a very good guy, in my opinion, what I saw, what I observed. But so that's one of the things you learn is that I guess you don't have to be a good guy to be a great CEO. I would like to think you did. That would fit my life view, but it's not true. It's not true. First of all, and I think since you read my book, you know this, I talk a lot about luck. So the most important factor is luck. And what really bothers me is that people don't own up to that. So they don't say, I was really lucky and some other guy, was just as good as me, but he wasn't lucky because one day I sat on the plane next to this guy and he told me this, or I told him that, or whatever. And I could have been in one seat below, I wouldn't have had that conversation. Yeah. So, so I would say the two things that are really important here is being lucky and then not mistaking luck for being smart.
I'll never forget. So the first time we talked on the phone, I remember that distinctly. I think I was asking you a question about how you evaluated either companies or people. Yeah. And you had talked to me about luck. And it was, I remember it distinctly. It was a fascinating discussion. And I think you're right. Too many people, they want to take credit as opposed to saying, well, I did get a little bit lucky here. So before we jump into questions, I'm curious, as somebody who was there in the room when the personal computer, internet, broadband, all of these things that now we take probably for granted, were being developed. What is it that you're fascinated about in the future? Is it the metaverse? Is it NFTs? Blockchain? Like, I don't know. You tell me.
Well, I have to say, I think a lot of these things are they're just technologies, be like, really getting excited and say, God, I'm just so excited about fiber optics, without understanding how. So I don't get too excited about that. Artificial intelligence is different. Okay. Artificial intelligence is going to change everything. Everything. Artificial intelligence is to the next 10 years what the microprocessor was, in the 90s and 2000. And we have no idea what this is going to bring, but it's going to revolutionize everything. And I think so. There's no technology that I think is more interesting. I think a lot of things that we've been interested in are going to kind of burn out. Like, okay, I've got really high bandwidth now. How much more bandwidth do I need? Mm-hmm. I got computers that are really fast. How much do I need? But there's going to be a whole new way of exploring this. And I think that the inspiration for how to use this isn't necessarily people that are in the computer industry. Right. And so every day I see things that are going on. Like I'm studying Hebrew. I've been studying it for a long time. And I'm working now with somebody who's teaching me how to pronounce Hebrew properly. But I just found that some guys at Stanford have just done an application that will correct your pronunciation so that you could pronounce with an accent and it will turn it out into, I mean, there's just no end of this stuff. The other things that are, the biological stuff is really interesting to me. So I just wrote a blog. By the way, I have a blog, all you people out there. It's called twothirsdone.com. I've been writing it for 16 years, so you can see my evolution as a writer. And it's now the anniversary of the 4004 microprocessor, the first microprocessor Intel developed. And my question in my blog was, will we still be using a microprocessor in 50 years? And I realized that 50 years before the first microprocessor, that no one could have conceived of a microprocessor we didn't have silicon technology. We didn't have computers. We didn't have any of these things. How would you,
Right.
how in the world would you, so then I thought, well, how can we do it now? Is it possible? And so, and I always like being the kind of person I am, like I just let my imagination go. And my imagination took me to thinking that the computing elements that we will use in the future will be derived from life forms. They'll be biological. They won't be silicon. We will grow them.
Interesting.
And I'm not talking about, I mean, already we're using DNA to store memory, but I somehow feel that, but I don't know this. I'm just telling you. So, but I'm really interested in because I started off my career, just a full circle. I started off my career monitoring brain waves, physiological signals. That was my expertise. And I actually made for myself a device that I could control the lighting. It would, so that if I was studying, the lights would be on. If I stopped studying, the light would go off and I would know that I wasn't concentrating. Okay, and that was probably 67.
Oh my God.
Okay, so I'm interested in how we will have a better interface, humans to computers. I have some ideas about that and so on, but when it comes to blockchain, I'm just bored. It's like a protocol in a way. I mean, yeah, great. It's like we have and yeah. Anyway, enough of all that. We could, if you want to get some questions, then we probably need to.
No, it's fascinating. Fascinating. So we're going to start off. Andrew was first on the call. Andrew's in California, and I know that you had a question for Avram. So Andrew, you're on with Avram.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Question regarding Intel's investment or ownership of Mobileye. And a couple weeks ago, they announced that they'd be spinning it into an IPO in 2022. So I'm curious to know your thoughts around if that's a good idea for them to spin that off or not, and then where you think the autonomous and driver assistance programs will be going in the future.
Yeah, well, I think it's an excellent idea. Okay, because I mean, this is the problem when you have Intel's being punished a lot. Basically, you could say it's being punished for sins that were of the past. And Pat Gelsinger rightly is going to spend a lot of money and he's going to depress earnings. And Wall Street, because it's so earnings centric on a quarterly basis, is going to, okay. So when you have a business that is not doing that, okay, it's very profitable, it's growing very fast, and it would demand a very high multiple. You can't get that multiple when it's buried inside a big company like Intel. So you take it out. So one, that will, it's really kind of strange because then it will actually enhance Intel's multiple because people will be able to see it. Oh, Intel owns X% of something that's worth whatever, and they will give it some value for that. But they will also be able to raise some money when they sell some stock if they want to. And it will incentivize the people at Mobileye because otherwise they're just going to walk out and start another one. How do you keep, and especially in this country, Israel, I can tell you, and it is so hot here, so what about autonomous driving? Yeah, within 5 to 10 years, it will be ubiquitous. That's why I keep saying, why are you putting garages in new buildings? I think in San Francisco stop doing that, but they're still doing it in Tel Aviv, and I think it's a big mistake. Why are we making people put garages in buildings? Or if they're going to do it, they should figure out a different way to do a garage so that it could be used for something else later. I'm looking forward to autonomous vehicles. I don't really like to drive, especially in Tel Aviv. Anything else?
No, that was good. I appreciate. You live in California? Sorry, everybody.
I live in Tel Aviv.
Oh, I thought you lived in California as well.
I have a home in Sonoma. I see your daughter, but we've been spending. Well, because of COVID, hardly any time, but normally we spend 2 months a year there. Okay. But we're going to give it up because we don't plan to come back to the United States.
Yeah.
There you go. I'm over the hill in Petaluma. That's why I was curious.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, I know Petaluma very well.
We are going next to Pennsylvania. Tyler Meckies, who works for Vidyard and is a burgeoning podcaster. Tyler, you
Awesome.
are
Thank you
up.
so much, Scott. And Avram, it's so nice to meet you. So
Nice to meet
something
you.
I found really, really interesting was the amount of adversity that you had to face specifically early on in your career, especially around the library where you had to go and pretty much learn for yourself. To me, it seems like, although it seems to me that others didn't really see you for what your true value was at that point and what you had to bring to the table. But ultimately, it sounds like you found out what your worth was. And obviously the success over the years speaks to that. What's your best piece of advice for handling some of those situations where you may not be seen for your true worth? And then ultimately, is there any kind of actionable advice you would give to others who may be looking to try to unlock their true potential or their worth?
Yeah. So I have to be, I think I have to change the picture of this a little bit because, I was what was called a gifted child. My IQ was off the charts. Everybody knew that. So it wasn't like they didn't know that. Okay. Had they not known that, these teachers might not have done what they did. If I was, okay. So I was capable of a lot of things. And so what happened is somebody recognized that. So the thing is that there are a lot of kids that can't function, and maybe in the school system, and I can understand why, because it was designed in the industrial age for a certain kind of thing. Make sure that people got to work on time and accepted boredom and did what they were told. I've had a lot of parents talk to me about this, and all I can say is, love your child, without, don't be judgmental. Okay. And I'm not answering the question very well because it depends so much on the person, but you got to kill the myth. You have to kill the myth that you have to go and it's step by step. You have to go to this school, you go to high school, you go to college, you go to grad school, you get a job at a good company and you do them. And if you don't do that, you're going to fail. It's not true. It's a lie. And so if I hope I can inspire some people to understand that what's really important is what you have inside yourself. And now with the internet and all these things, my God, what I could have done when I was 8 years old with the internet. I had a radio that I had to build myself out of a crystal set, and I listened to one science project show once a week at 10 o'clock in the morning. That was the only access I had besides the library.
Avram,
yeah.
Do you think college, so Gary Vaynerchuk talks a lot about what a scam college is and that he doesn't believe that it will exist in the future.
Yeah.
Are you of the same mind?
I think that college, university will become like Spotify. And so, I learn every day. So I think the question is how, if we just intermediate all this and we say, well, what are the functions? Well, one function is attesting to the fact that somebody knows something.
Yep.
That's a valuable thing. You say you're an engineer. How do I know you're an engineer? Okay. And so, but how you come about, what you have to do in order to get certified, there could be many, many, many paths for that. So I think it will get disintermediated, and there will be a place you could go and say, I want to become whatever, an engineer.
Yep.
How should I approach it? And then somebody should go and figure out, well, how does this person learn? We don't all learn the same way.
Right.
So, okay, they don't spend any time. They don't do a thing to find out anything about you. Okay. And so how do you learn? When I was at Digital Equipment Corporation, which we didn't have a chance to talk about, and I was running a large engineering organization, the training group there said to me, there are 4 groups. There are people who are sequential and there are people who are random. That was one dimension. There are people who are concrete and there are people that are abstract. Okay, so there was 4 quadrants. And they said, but luckily, we only have to teach people that are concrete sequential, because all engineers are concrete sequential. And I yelled at them because I had never gone to engineering school and I had 1,000 engineers working for me. And I said, no, the only people that can get through engineering school are concrete sequential. And so we have to learn, we have to have different ways of learning, and hopefully this will open up and we will get a better quality. God, we need it. We need a better quality. On a scale, if we had an objective scale of education, where would we put our education system? I would guess maybe a 3.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty bad. Pretty bad.
Right above government.
Well, that might be able to be argued. We're going to go to my favorite Googler, Jeff DeStasio in Vermont.
Yeah, it's a dichotomy in and of itself. Vermont and Google.
Yeah.
Pleasure to meet you, Avram.
Pleasure to meet you.
Really value the experience and wisdom. You've lived a remarkable life, and I sort of, having lived my entire career in the technology industry and looking at the pace of advancement, you strike me as somebody that can answer a question about how we retain our humanity in the face of such amazing and rapid and exponentially increasing advances in technology. And I think it's a question that's probably come to the top of everybody's mind more and more as we spend time in front of screens instead of with people in the last 2 years and see where things are headed. So I'm just curious your perspective.
Yeah, I'm kind of open about that because, okay, this is going to be a little bit controversial probably for some. So let's imagine that we have a family, and in this family, there's a kid, and the kid is spending a lot of time on his phone communicating with somebody else, someplace else, okay? Instead of what? Sitting with his family watching some sport events, okay? So is that good or is that bad? Are we losing humanity because we're out there communicating? Like, I have communication with people and I don't know much about them, but I know a lot about them with respect to something, and so I'm not sure. I mean, if we bring things up like, okay, what's going on Facebook and all the issues that are, separating people, of course, that's I'm not happy about that. But I don't know that that's systemic, that's going to stay, that's permanent. We're going through various transitions. We have to learn what's going to happen here. I like the idea that we're all connected. And I remember in the 90s, I was the founding chairman of a nonprofit called Plugged In. And we were in East Palo Alto. And we had all these Black and brown kids, and we were teaching them to use technology. And one of the kids said to me, I have this friend and he doesn't know that I'm Black and I don't know what he is. And, and it was like, and we're just talking about stuff, So I don't know, does that give you any sense of that? I probably didn't answer your question right, but I'm not worried.
I appreciate it.
I'm not worried. Okay. We have bigger threats.
Yeah, fascinating. We're gonna go to New York to Morgan. Morgan, you're up.
Thanks, Scott. Avram, a real pleasure to meet you. I'm having a blast with this. I have to tell you, and it's uncanny some of the personal parallels I'm finding. I'm a child immersion. I'm what I call reform musician. Very much an autodidact, and like yourself, I think what everybody calls these days neurodivergent, right? Differently brained. So feel I'm talking to a kindred spirit here. I could ask you a million questions. I'd love to hear your thoughts about biotechnology and the stuff they're doing with algae and nanotechnology, but I want to center in on AI a little bit. And that's why I've spent probably the past 5-7 years of my technology life. And maybe a quick two-part question. One, which area of AI, it's a pretty broad field, which one has really got your attention as being the most impactful? You've got computer vision, you've got machine learning, deep learning, you've got conversational AI, right? Natural language processing, the list goes on. And then second, more around the risk, there's been a lot of talk in the global press and even at places like Davos about the risks of AI. And you have folks like Elon Musk coming out being very much sort of dystopian about what's going to happen when you get machine sentience. So, if you could give me, give us, sorry, your perspective there, right?
I have to say, I think right now I'm more worried about Elon Musk than I am worried about AI. But so first of all, as we said, I'm not working full time. Like I'm spending my time, doing lots of things. And but when it comes to AI, so the only place I really spend time thinking about it much is in the medical domain, because as some of you know, I started my career in medicine and I continued to have some involvement in it. And then later after retirement, I went back to start doing things in medicine. And I'm a senior advisor to the research labs, the Research Institute of the Cleveland Clinic. And so, I've been thinking a lot about, this is what happens when you get old, by the way, you get really interested in healthcare. And so, I think that we will have the combination of, technology, the AI, and also telemedicine, but I'll leave that alone. AI. AI will revolutionize medicine. It will change the way we do medicine totally. It will make us look like what we do medicine now is like when they were, bleeding people, and it will happen very, very rapidly. It'll happen very, very rapidly because, medicine is still science-based. And if you can prove something, if you can prove that a computer can recognize cancer in a scan months before humans can, then it would be irresponsible not to use the computer. So that's the only place that I really follow it, other than when it can touch me. There's something that I'm doing or, that might be. Okay.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
We're going to go to Tom in Florida from BD, Becton Dickinson.
Hey, thank you. This has been an incredible 50 minutes so far. I'm gonna take a big left turn with my question here. I've got a strong baseline here because my parents are 75, and your youthfulness is striking to me. So I'm just curious, secrets of longevity for you. Anything that you've really.
Well, first of all, you have to pick the right parents.
Good genes, obviously. Yes, good genes are obviously important.
My dad died at 97. He was working out 6 days a week for 3 hours a day until he was 95. He ran a couple miles every day, so that helps. I'm lucky I had that. Although I did something different than my dad. My dad would not exercise his brain. Eventually, he actually had dementia. And no matter what I did, I couldn't get him to understand that he had to do that. And I do at least an hour a day of exercises for cognitive function.
What types? What are they?
So there's something called a company called Positive Science, which is focused on brain neuroplasticity. I was involved when it first got started. I still own some of it, and they have an app called Brain HQ. And it's been peer reviewed. It's very, very, very effective. And so I strongly recommend that. I just think called Elevate every day. And which gives me a sense of where I am in my cognitive function. Plus, I'm studying Hebrew, which would, if you want to study something that will really use up your neurons, boy. So I do that every day. And, and I still try to use my imagination to imagine things. One of the ways I used to solve problems in business when I didn't know, because I believe in intuition, and I say intuition is when you know something, but you don't know how you know it. So I would always create an image of something, and like a red box in my brain. And then I would stare at it until the answer came. Because what I was doing, it's like meditation. I was trying to get rid of all the distractions so that my subconscious could work on the problem. And so my subconscious knew that that was the problem. I told it, that's the problem. That's the way the problem looks. You solve it. I think there's so much more that we could learn to do with our brains. And fortunately, we learned about neuroplasticity probably only 15 years ago or whatever. We thought that your brain doesn't evolve. That's bullshit. And so I'm really looking forward to people finding ways, and this is where biofeedback would play a big role. Because sleep is like really, really important, and sleep is something I've been working on for now almost 8 years.
You have the ring on?
I was the first investor in that company. But other things, I did a lot of work in sleep apnea and breathing at night and so on. And because sleep is really a critical part of this whole thing. But, we just haven't spent the time to learn. We've got the best hardware in the world sitting up here. I hope people start experimenting more. Then we were looking at using drugs, but then we got really upset about drugs. And so we don't like to experiment with using drugs, which is, I'm not for, recreational. I don't care, but I don't do it. But I'm all for, learning how the brain works by using drugs to discover things. And we're now like, you can hardly, go near it, I guess.
Fascinating. We've got, I think, time for 2 more questions. We're going to go to Portugal, to Helen. Helen, thanks for joining us.
Hi, I'm so happy because I've been studying Portuguese and I couldn't make the other times. So I'm so happy today to be here, Avram. Thank you so much for all this information. I didn't actually know what to expect, but I see we have a lot in common because I studied neurofeedback as well. And now I work with DNA. So I'm a DNA upgrade specialist. So I work with consciousness and the DNA. But what I want to ask you is a little bit more about the imagination. Like when you were saying that you changed colors, I'm interested just out of curiosity to know how you did that. And then I also have specific interest in the positive evolution of artificial intelligence by increasing human intelligence that I do through the DNA upgrades. But I want to know from you, what is for you the most important factor in the positive evolution of artificial intelligence, and how important the marriage between spirituality and science is to you?
Well, I don't think so. Okay, where
I answer one as well.
Can I work backwards?
Yes.
I don't couple spiritual. I can even say it. In science, I don't know. It's you can be in awe of something. You can think. We don't understand. First thing, let's start with this. We don't understand some of the most important things in science. We don't understand what consciousness is. We don't understand how the universe really works, and quantum mechanics and so on. There's lots of stuff we don't understand. You can feel certain ways about it. I have at different times of my life. I don't right now, probably not so much, but I have in different times. That was a spiritual question. What was the other one about?
About imagination and what you think is the most important factor in the positive evolution of artificial intelligence.
Yeah. Imagining. So this is what makes us human. is our imagination. You know, we can imagine things. We can imagine the future. We can imagine, you know, we can imagine something and then we can go there. Imagination is one of the critical things about being a human, but we don't practice it. They don't teach it in school. And we don't sit around and say, let's imagine something, you know? And so, I mean, if you write a book, a novel, you can imagine something, whatever, but basically we don't sit there and imagine. So my imagination when I was young was visual. I could make things in my head and I could see them and I could rotate them and I could play with them. And so, because my room was kind of boring. And so, and changing the color in the wall, I didn't know you couldn't do that. You know, I didn't know you couldn't do it. I just started doing it. I thought, well, you know, what if I change the color of the wall? What if I make the room longer? You know, so but I was only 7 years old, but nobody told me I couldn't do it. You know, if they knew I was doing it, they probably would have slapped my hands and said, don't do this. You know, it was, you know, some kind of mental masturbation or something. But anyway, if they didn't know I was doing it, I was just doing it by myself. And then your question about artificial intelligence was about
the positive evolution, yeah.
Well,
what's the most important factor? Yeah.
Factor about positive evolution? Look, the most important factor about positive anything is how we humans behave, right? Because right now we're still in control of all this stuff. So our behavior isn't so good. So it's, you know, it's a battle. You know, there's all these great things that are happening and all these awful and evil things that are happening. And we're at the margin all the time. And I think that the good stuff is kind of, I know it's hard to imagine again, but the good stuff is winning out, because in the past we had a lot more of the bad stuff. And so they're pulling up neck and neck. And so I hope the good stuff will overcome the bad stuff. I probably won't be around to see the final chat or whatever next chapter is, but that's my hope.
Love it. We're gonna
Thank you very much.
We're gonna end with Kathy Slayton in Florida. Kathy, you're up.
Hi, thanks, Scott, and lovely to meet you here, at least on this webinar, Avram, so thank you. My question is this: I have a young son. He is he just turned 10, and having already paid for his college, what advice could you give to me or other parents of younger kids to help scale education, to plan for a career of the future, if we're not thinking in a more classical sense?
Well,
does that make sense?
Well, I understand your question. Whether or not it's achievable, I don't know. But he's 10 and you're talking about 8 years from now?
Yes, sir.
So the world 8 years from now will be very different. So what you have to do, so resiliency is important. I think I would take, if I had a child that age, I would try to expose them to a lot of stuff and a lot of different people.
Let them fail.
You know, and let them fail. Oh, failure is the most important thing. You know, if you're not failing, you're really not trying. You're not trying. If you do read my book, which I hope some of you would buy my book, you will find that I write a lot about failure. I write a lot about luck, and I write a lot about failure. And but if you don't fail, you don't learn.
It's a great teacher, and I think one of the things that I see is, you know, people say, you know, adversity is at an all-time high and all that. I think people's ability to handle adversity is at an all-time low, just because parents through love inoculate their children from any potential for failure. And while they're doing it from a place of love, I think they're doing them a big disservice, because that's really where all the learning takes place.
Yeah. Yes, I agree with that.
So my year is made. Avram Miller just agreed with me. So you can't get better than that. Avram, what's next for you? 77 in late January. What's next on the horizon for you?
I don't know. You know, I want to go back to writing music. I was doing that before.